Well, good morning. If you haven't figured out a theme this week or this year, then obviously you've been asleep all morning. So wake up. The theme is you belong, and so we're going to be talking about that all this morning and all month. All my lessons are going to be focused on that simple fact that you do belong, and you belong first and foremost to God. So I want to start out really simply this morning, really simply actually, and say this. Say that my clicker isn't working. That's nice. First thing I want to say is number one, everyone has parents. Everyone has parents. Now, I know, bear with me here, bear with me. Everyone has parents. And what I mean by that is this. At some point, somewhere, at some time, there was a father and a mother involved in your creation. That's all I mean by that. All right? At some point, somewhere, sometime, a man and a woman were involved in your creation. So we all have parents. And that's as simple as it gets, okay? That's as simple as it gets. It gets more complicated after that, all right? So the next thing I want to say is this. Many people grow up in different circumstances, though. Even though we all have a man and a woman that involved in our creation, we all grow up in different circumstances. You know, here's some simple facts that I want you to know this morning that are horrible facts to know, unfortunately, but I want you to know these things. Number one, do you know there's over 18,000 people, kids in foster care in New York State? Just in New York State. That's not the whole U.S. That's just in New York State. There are over 1.4 million single parents in New York alone. And there are 32,000 under the age of 16, as far as they can count, because it's a hard number to count, that are homeless in the U.S. Can you imagine that? I can't even imagine any of those things. Even though we all have parents that have created us, we all grew up very differently. You know, some of us maybe had a mom and dad. Some of us maybe had a stepdad or stepmom. Some of us maybe were adopted. Some of us may have lived in foster homes. Some of us may have only had one dad, or maybe had one mom. Or maybe you were raised by your grandmother or your grandfather. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is, here's my point. My point is this. No matter what the circumstances, we all want to belong to something. We all want to belong to something. Some of you may be thinking this morning, actually, there's a lot of times I like to be alone. My wife sometimes will tell you, with 3 boys in the house, there's times when she comes to me and says, I really like some alone time. I don't understand why, but, apparently, she does. And so she needs some alone time. But here's the thing. Even those people here that are thinking right now, yeah, I could live alone. Trust me, I could live alone. I want you to know that they have done surveys of people who have actually gone out into the wilderness and started living all alone. All right? Out in the wilderness, nobody around them for miles and miles and miles and miles. Do you know what they all had in common? Do you guys know what the first thing every single person who went out and lived alone started doing? Talking to themselves. It's the first thing that happened. You start talking to yourself. Why? Because we crave companionship. We want to be a part of something. We want to belong to something. When God created us, when God created the earth, He created pairs of everything. Why? Because He knew that it wasn't good for us to be alone. Since then, we continue to try to feel like we belong to something. We constantly are trying and trying. Let me give you a for instance. How many of you remembered choosing teams? Right? Choosing teams in gym class. All right, most of us have done that. Choosing teams in gym class, there was 2 things that were absolutely certain in every single person's mind. Number 1, no kid wants to be picked last. Right? Not a single one of us wanted to be picked last. Everybody wants to be picked before that. And secondly, The quicker you're picked, the more you felt a part of it. The more you felt worthy. The more you felt that you belonged. You see that we feel valuable the earlier we're picked. And even if if the gym teacher actually chooses you to be the captain to pick the other kids, then even more so do you feel that you belong. But here's the problem with that. Our value does not come from people. Our value does not come from people. I want everybody to understand that your value does not come from other people's opinion of who you are. It does not come from other people's opinion of how you act. It does not come from someone else's opinion on how you look. You see, I know it's easy to say, don't worry about what others think. But we all know that it's hard. In the world that we're conditioned to live in here, that we've been conditioned to live in, it's very hard to do. We're trying to constantly to try to fit in, to belong. Nobody wants to be that outsider. We want to belong. But I tell you that we are looking in the wrong direction. We are looking in the wrong direction when we're trying to feel that we belong. Because we don't need to look at other people around us. We don't need to look at other people in our workplace or in our society. What we need to look at is something very, very different. So do you know what it truly means to belong? I want you to look at this next verse with me. I will be your father, and you will be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. You belong to God. You belong to God. No matter what you have done, no matter what the circumstances of your life have been, no matter who you think you are, you belong to God. God says you belong, and He says it's not to a club that you belong, or not to some special group of friends, or not to a team, but you belong to Him. And that makes everything that we do when we come together so important. Because it's no longer about what we're going to accomplish by ourselves. All we have to do is read the first book of the Bible and talk about Babel. And how they wanted to create this giant tower to make a name for themselves so everyone around them could know who they truly were. And if that's what we were concerned about, then we would do all sorts of things to our property here to make everyone know who we are. Put a giant steeple or a spire out in front, right? Well, I was driving past a church in Texas. They had this giant spire. I mean, I have no idea. It was 10 stories high. Trying to figure out, what does that represent? The guy in the car said it represents about $120,000. Is that who we are? No, because God has placed us together, because He brings us together and says, you do belong here. You do belong with each other. You belong to me. Then we know the things that we are to do are for His glory and for His honor. So we need to stop looking to the world for our value and our self-worth. Right? We need to stop looking towards everyone else and stop looking at the commercials and trying to figure out, do I look like that or do I need that to fit in? You don't belong to the world, you belong to God. Stop trying to change your situation by changing your hairstyle or your dress. Stop trying to fit in to places that you know you're not supposed to fit in. And stop trying to make more acceptable or trying to be more acceptable to others by changing your values and your beliefs. I truly believe that we're in a crisis situation, folks. I really believe that. You may not agree with me, that's okay. But I'm telling you, I think we're in a crisis situation. I think all over the world right now, Christians are letting go of their beliefs, letting go, or relaxing on their beliefs at least, relaxing on the things that they believe, their values, and are just accepting by not speaking. continuously accepting things around us. We do not have to accept everything around us. We do not have to accept it. If it is wrong, it is wrong. If it's right, it's right. And that's okay. We need to understand that we need to stop trying to make more acceptable by our inactions even the things of this world. You are valuable to God. I want you to think about your families right now. I know we all have families, right? We all have families at some point. And each of those family members is valuable to you. There may be a day or two where you want to trade one for another, but at the reality of it is they're all valuable to the family. And I want that to be the message for today. I want you to understand that God deems you valuable, and you are valuable to the family. This family. If you are here today, I want to tell you, if you're visiting, this is not an accident. It's not an accident that you're here this morning. If you're a member here, I want you to know it's not an accident that you're here this morning. You belong to God. And God has placed you in a place that is going to allow you to grow. It's going to be a place where it's going to challenge you. It's going to be a place where there's going to be struggles that you're going to have to work through, because it's filled with imperfect people, all of us. But nevertheless, He has placed you in a place where I promise you, you belong. It's not a club. It's not a group of friends. It's belonging to God. Let's get back to our scripture for a moment. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created them, male and female. He created them. Listen, we are valuable to God because of that very reason. If nothing else, we are His creation. How many of you have actually built something that you were proud of? Anybody ever built something you're proud of? You guys built something you're proud of? Okay. There was all sorts of things growing up that you built in art class and all these things. But at some point, somewhere, there's something that you built or made or created or painted that you were very proud of. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And that's exactly the same thing what I'm telling you now. God created us, and that's why we're important. That's why we're important. If we were art, we'd be on His refrigerator. We are valuable to God because we are His creation. We also see God doing so much in Scripture for us for a specific reason. And before I get to that reason, when I started, I loved to hike in the Adirondacks. I loved to camp in the Adirondacks. I started camping and canoeing in the Adirondacks when I was in my teenager years with my brother, and we started doing that. And the one thing my grandfather made sure, I'm not sure it was my grandfather, it may have been my dad, but one thing they wanted to make sure that I knew: if you come across a bear with cubs, don't get in between them. Okay? I don't know about you guys, but if I see a bear, I'm not going anywhere near him. But I have seen bears in the Adirondacks, but don't get between a bear and a cub. Most of you, if you've ever hiked or anything, you know why, right? Because that mama bear will do anything and everything to protect her cubs. It's a natural instinct that is built in. It's no different if there was something happening to our own children, that we would step in and try to do anything we possibly could to help them out. It's an instinct that we get from God. Because God Himself has done everything possible to make sure that you understand that you belong. He's done everything possible. He has sent prophets. He has sent angels. And He has sent His only Son specifically just to let you know that you belong. He's done everything possible to help us understand that. He wants us with Him. He wants us safe. And so He's going to continue to provide for us every day of our lives. And the reason being, God's love has no limits. Jeremiah 31:3 says this, I have loved you with an everlasting love, therefore I continued my faithfulness to you. I love that he says that to Jeremiah. You know, here's the time period you're looking at. In reality, Israel has fallen away from God. They have done this over and over and over again. The Old Testament, if you want the Old Testament in a nutshell, the Old Testament is all about how God's people continuously wander away from Him and He continuously tries to pull them back. That's really the Old Testament. He wants His people to be with Him. He wants His people to follow Him, but they continuously have time after time again wander away. And He says to Jeremiah, I loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, I have continued my faithfulness to you. You see, God's faithfulness is not based upon circumstances. He loves us. And that's not going to change. You know, belonging to something, there are circumstances to that, aren't there? There's conditions, at least. I remember when I was in high school, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to get a nice in the varsity club. They don't have that nowadays because apparently that's too, exclusive. Yeah, it's too exclusive for schools nowadays. But I wanted to be in varsity club. But you know what? To be in varsity club, you couldn't just go out and buy a jacket to be in varsity club. There were requirements. There were conditions. You had to get 2 varsity letters. If you had 2 varsity letters, you automatically got into the varsity club and you received your jacket. But you had to have those 2 letters. There were conditions. There are conditions to everything, every type of club and team you want to be on. If you want to be on a team, you cannot just show up for the games. You actually have to go to the practices. Right? There are conditions. Here's the thing. God says we belong because we're His creation. I don't know about you, but I didn't have anything to do with that. I didn't have anything to do with that. As a matter of fact, that's pretty easy for me because I don't have anything to do with that. He created us. And because He created us, He loves us. Again, I've done nothing to do that. I've done nothing to meet some sort of qualification for that. He loves us, and He tells us that we belong to Him. I've loved you with an everlasting love, therefore I have continued my faithfulness to you. God is always there waiting for us. He simply loves us because we belong to Him. That will not change with time. That will not change with circumstances from our own lives. And that certainly will not change with circumstances in the world. The conditions that He sets for us are very simple. You belong to Him. You belong to Him. That's the condition. We'll get to some more about that in a minute. Another reason is because He loves us like a father. I put up Matthew 6 up here because I thought, how appropriate is this? But when you pray, go into your room and shut your door and pray to your Father. I love this when Jesus tells His disciples how to pray, because He doesn't say go in and say, "Oh mighty Lord, creator of the heavens and the earth." Is He that? Absolutely He is. He says, go in, shut your door, and call upon the one who truly wants to be your Father. Father. Not King, not Creator, not Lord of Lords. No, Father. Because that's the relationship He wants with us. If He wanted a king and servant relationship, He would have asked for that. But no, He wants us to understand His love for us. And so like any father, He wants to hear from us. Right? Like any father, He wants to hear from us. So He asks us to pray to Him. Share your day with Him. Does He know all and sees all? Yes, but that doesn't matter. He wants to hear it from you. And so He wants us to bring everything to Him. He wants us to live in His instruction. In other words, He wants us to obey Him on a daily basis. He wants us to truly live in His discipline sometimes, which we don't like very much. And He wants us to continue His instruction in His instruction for generations to come. In other words, He wants us to pass it down. He wants you to know that you belong, but you are to tell others that they belong too. They belong to God. Because He loves us. Because He's our or we're His creation. Because He loves us and because He's our Father. But the bottom line comes down to this. You have to choose. You have to choose. I wish I could say that it doesn't matter. And no matter what you do, no matter how you live, no matter who your friends are, that it didn't matter. But it does. It does. And it comes down to the fact that you have to choose whether you're going to live for God or you're going to live in the world. That's what it really comes to. Which one do you want to belong to? Do you want to belong to a God who has created you, who loves you, who wants to be your Father, or do you want to be a part of a world that says you can have anything you want, anything you need, but realistically is not going to stand up for you at all? Is not going to help you when you're struggling. Is not going to be with you when in your time of need. Instead, the world just kind of gives us a bunch of empty promises. And sure, I'll tell you, I'm okay. Sin, there's a lot of sin out there that's really good. Short-lived. And not going to lead anywhere except death and destruction. But God is the one that says, I love you everlasting. Right? God is the one who says that I am going to be with you. God is the one who says, I have created a place for you for all time. So you have to choose. You can't choose both. You belong to either God or the world. One will lift you up and love you like a father loves a child. The other will change every day and will leave you alone without hope. But it is your choice. But to help you with that choice, here's the thing. God's provided a place. Now, I'll tell you, I put a little picture of a little church building up there. I like little country church buildings. They're nice. And some of you are in your minds going right now going, well, that's not the church. You're right. It's not. And that's why I put it up there. Because I want you to all understand, you are the church. You are what God has provided. I'm going to make it personal. You are what God has provided for me to know that I belong to God. We are what God has provided for Keith to know that you belong. We are all what God has provided for each and every one of us to know that we belong to God. You do not belong to this world. You can choose to live in it. God gives you that choice. It's free will. And we'll talk about that on another Sunday. But the fact of the matter is, you belong to God. And He wants you. So you make that choice. And understand that we are here to help every one of us to stay on that right path. And I'm going to tell you right up front that God has provided a place that's not perfect, And it's not because God didn't make it perfect, it's because none of us are perfect. God has provided a place to belong that isn't a building, but it's the people inside. And we're brought together by one main purpose: to let everyone know you belong. So this morning, as we end this morning, I want you to know that you belong. And I want you to know, if you don't feel like you belong, then we have some work to do. As a congregation, we have some work to do. If you don't feel like you belong, then don't just sit back and say, I don't feel like I belong. You need to come to us. Christopher had a splinter in his foot this past summer. It was a pretty big splinter. And he walked around with it for 3 or 4 days. Never told us that he had a splinter in his foot, until all of a sudden we saw him starting, favoring the other foot. And we finally looked at it and, told him, you have to tell us if you're hurting for us to help you. You belong, but you have to tell us that you're hurting if you want us to help you. That's what we're here for. If you have anything that you need this morning, if we can help you, we're a family brought together for one purpose. Please come as we stand and sing.